The son of Bruce Lee, a famous martial artist who died, has also died. Brandon Lee, who is 27 years old, died in an accident on a movie set today. He was working on a scene for the movie The Crow. Brandon Lee was young and talented, and he finally put his head against the door and his feet in front of the camera. Everyone was shocked when Brandon didn't get up. Everyone heard the medic say, "Brandon, are you okay?" The place went completely still. After that, there was a storm of confusion, lies, and conspiracy theories that wouldn't go away. Why was there a genuine bullet in a fake gun? Who didn't check the gun? And why did so many people break the rules? We'll look at the scary similarities between Bruce Lee's death and the set's so-called curse. We'll also tell you the shocking ending that even the investigators didn't see coming. The deadly scene that changed everything. It was meant to be a simple sequence, a normal action beat in a movie packed of violence, grit, and exaggerated revenge. Brandon Lee, who played Eric Draven in The Crow, was going to burst through a door with a lot of groceries in his arms when attackers attacked him. One of them, played by Michael Massey, would pull out his gun and shoot. Brandon's character was supposed to fall to the ground in a big way. It was all planned out very meticulously. They had practiced it. And it wasn't even that dangerous by Hollywood gunplay standards. But as soon as the camera started rolling that night, everything fell apart. The scene started out as planned. Massey pulled the trigger on the revolver. The gunfire was loud and sudden, yet no one freaked out. At first, no. During production, crew members had heard scores of identical explosions. Brandon collapsed to the ground just like he was supposed to. Massey stayed in character. The director said cut. There was a lot of applause. For a few seconds, it looked like they had it right. Then someone saw that Brandon wasn't moving. There was a lot of uncertainty at first. A hushed feeling of uneasiness spread through the room. Was he still acting? Was he waiting for a second line? Then someone yelled at him. No response. Quickly, panic set in. People came running. Someone yelled for an ambulance. Crew members turned Brandon over and discovered that his shirt was soaked with blood. Not synthetic blood, but actual blood coming from a wound on his stomach. Someone had shot him with something real, not a blank or a fake prop. The set fell apart. They called for paramedics. Brandon was taken quickly to New Hanover Regional Medical Center, where he had emergency surgery for hours. The bullet had ripped through too much for doctors to stop the internal bleeding. Brandon Lee was declared dead at 1:03 p.m. on March 31, 1993, despite all efforts. He was 28 years old. The production crew's first reaction was disbelief. There are accidents on site, but never like this. Not when the pretend pistol was intended to have blanks in it, which makes the noise and flash but doesn't shoot anything. But something had stabbed Brandon's torso with deadly accuracy. Things had gone horribly, and there was no way to fix them. Michael Massey, the actor who pulled the trigger, was heartbroken. He later called it the night that took away his innocence, the instant he realized how serious the event was. Massey didn't perform for a long time because he was scared to talk about that night. Many people who worked on the show felt that he never really got better. Brandon Lee was killed on set. An actor dies in a strange accident. These were the headlines that shocked the world. But beneath the headlines was a torrent of questions that had no answers. How could this happen on a movie set, like the ones you see in professional terms? Who was in charge of keeping guns safe? Why wasn't the weapon checked out before the scene? And the most terrifying thing is, what was inside the rifle when the trigger was pulled? At first, the official account was not very clear. Some people thought it was a blank misfire. Some others claimed that a piece of debris might be stuck in the barrel. But none of the above could hold up when the autopsy report came out. An actual .44 caliber bullet extracted out of Brandon's body. That wasn't just an accident. It is a loaded gun that fires a rising star in front of a lot of people. And this wasn't the first time things went wrong on that set. Not even close. The curse of the Crow is here. People on the site were already saying that the crow was cursed long before Brandon Lee fell to the floor. From the start, strange things had been going wrong with the production. A carpenter who worked on the set was badly burned when a piece of equipment he was working on touched live wires just a few weeks into production. It was a bizarre accident that could have easily ended in death. 2 additional crew members were hurt on the same day, although in different ways. That day alone was enough to start whispers, but things got worse. Parts of the set didn't work. The equipment broke down. Part of the outside set was ruined by a storm. Actors got hurt in tiny but growing ways. At first, folks thought it was funny. As a joke, they began to nickname it the Curse of the Crow. But there was an increasing sense of dread behind the laughter. Even experienced pros who had worked on many shows started to think something was wrong. After that, the long nights came. The cast and crew worked 18-hour days and had to turn things around quickly, which drove them to the limit. Some were working 90 to 100 hours a week and could scarcely sleep or think straight. That kind of tiredness isn't simply bad for you. It is risky. Things were done quickly. Safety rules got less strict. It was really hard to finish the movie on time. People thought the worst was over because they had previously filmed so many frightening exploits. They were completely wrong. The story itself also added to the creepy atmosphere. The story of a crow that kills a guy and his fiancée and then rises from the dead to get back at both of them. This was a dark, violent, poetic gothic fantasy full of death and revenge. Brandon's role as Eric Draven comes back to life after he dies. After his real death, no one would have missed the symbolism. Because of that dark illusion for individuals who saw both worlds, the lines had been painted to look like they were fading. Entertainment Weekly reporter Julianne Jerry, who was covering the production, talked about how strange the mood was on set. She claimed that nothing ever seemed to go well. There was a constant feeling of fear that only got worse as the filming went on. A lot of people were already apprehensive by the time Brandon was set to film his last scenes. He felt they had gotten through so many close calls. Almost done, they simply had to shoot for another week or 2 before they could completely relax. They had no idea that their worst threat was still to come. People never believed the scene that would kill Brandon was a big thing. There was no need for a stunt double, explosives, or fire. Brandon just had to walk through a door with groceries in his hands. He gets shot, falls, and suddenly the camera stops. Finished. No one thought anything out of the usual would happen, but it turned out to be the saddest part of the whole show. The process of making the movie. After Brandon died, a lot of people started to think about the crow's fate from the very beginning. We waited for hours, and finally they came out and told us he had died. As if things were going to fail before the shooting ever started. Some others thought that supernatural forces were at work. Some people connected what had happened to the script itself, which was a bad theme that ran across the whole subject of violence and resurrection. Very few people talked about how close Brandon was to death, like when he buried his father, Bruce Lee, when he was only 8 years old under very strange circumstances. One crew member has claimed that he will only talk about this if he can stay anonymous. Some people have said it was haunted. I don't know what that means. But there were clearly unpleasant feelings on set. The truth about the gun that killed him, the smoking gun, would show something much worse than a curse. Once the shock wore off and the sadness set in, investigators focused on one important question. How did a real bullet get into a fake gun used in a movie? There was no blank that went off by mistake or a trick that went awry. The autopsy showed that an entire .44 caliber slug had gone through Brandon Lee's stomach, which destroyed the idea that this was just a strange accident. It signified that someone had made a deadly mistake in the chain of command and loaded the gun with a bullet that might kill. The revolver in the scenario was a real gun, a Smith & Wesson Model 629-44 Magnum. Using genuine guns for authenticity is not commonplace in Hollywood. They've been changed so that they can shoot blanks, which make a loud bang and a flash at the end of the barrel without a bullet. But this time, things went really wrong. This is what really happened. The crew had already filmed a close-up sequence with the identical revolver earlier in the shoot. To make it look real, they utilized dummy bullets to make the gun look loaded. These seem like genuine bullets, yet they shouldn't do anything at all. No powder. No base coat. Just for looks. But the props team made a big mistake. They took out the gunpowder but left the primer in the mock cartridges. In a true bullet, the primer is what sets off the powder and fires the bullet. A primer still has a modest explosive charge, even if it doesn't have any powder. When one of the dummy rounds was dry-fired during that earlier close-up, the primer went off just enough to propel the bullet out of its casing and into the barrel of the pistol. This is called a squib load. Nobody saw it. No one looked at the barrel after that. The bullet stayed on the gun's barrel, which was a deadly waiting trap. A few days later, false cartridges were taken out of the barrel to get ready for Brandon's scene. Only blanks were put back in. Blanks have gunpowder and a primer in them, but they don't have a bullet at the end. They are made to look like real gunfire for the movie, not like shooting a bullet with flashes, smoke, and sound. But now that there was a bullet caught in the barrel with a blank behind it, something terrible happened. Michael Massey pressed the trigger, which set off the blank. The gas and pressure from that pushed the bullet out of the barrel as if it were a live cartridge. There was no sign. There was no traffic. Brandon was on the floor after just one loud gunshot and a flash of light. It was already too late by the time anyone could see it clearly. It wasn't just an accident, it was a series of careless mistakes. Someone should have looked at the weapon. The fake rounds should have been made correctly. Before any live fireworks were used on set, a licensed armorer should have checked the gun. But this is the most scary aspect. That night, there was no qualified firearms master on the set. Instead, a nervous, tired, and probably unqualified prop assistant handled a working gun and knew what dangers it posed on the job. Most likely not. In any other place, this kind of carelessness would be considered a crime. They said it was a mistake in Hollywood. Later, the official inquiry confirmed this chain of events that led to Brandon's death. The investigation called the event an accident, but many people in the profession and Brandon's close family thought it was more like criminal negligence. One small mistake, one safety check that was missed. You know what? Here it is. The curse has struck us again. There were some things that happened on the Crow before Brandon's accident. One bullet that shouldn't have been there took a complete life, a rising star, in 10 minutes. But if this was merely carelessness, why did some individuals start talking about sabotage? We will never use real guns again, whether it's on TV, in movies, or in any other way. When you look more closely at how the Crow was made, you see a worrying pattern that goes beyond just one tragic blunder. Brandon Lee's death was caused by a mix of shortcuts, tiredness, bad communication, and safety rules that were too lax. That night, things didn't nearly go wrong because of a technical issue. It was the only thing that could happen when a film set was pushed too far. The Crow had a lot to do and not much time or money to do it. It wasn't a big hit at the box office. It was a gritty action movie with a mid-range budget that tried to make every dollar count. The pressure to finish quickly grew as the shoot went on. Delays cost money, and money meant risk. So rules were broken, corners were cut, and tired personnel were given jobs that experts should have done, with little room for mistakes. The armorer for the movie, who was officially in charge of all weapons on set, wasn't even there the night Brandon was shot. A prop assistant, who had no official training in gun safety, was in charge of that. They didn't have a license, weren't qualified, and didn't know how to properly clear or inspect a gun. In fact, there were reports that the same team had been handling both genuine and fake rounds with little difference, mixing them together without being careful in earlier sequences. In theory, 3 people, the armorer, the assistant director, and the actor, should check a gun before it is certified safe. The Crow skipped over that whole line of duty. The gun was loaded, given to the actor, and discharged without anyone checking it first. It wasn't simply that night that was scary. The whole mood of the shoot was what it was. Crew members later said that they were working 6 days a week for 18 hours a day, and sometimes even more than 90 hours. It's not simply bad for your health to be that tired. It's really dangerous, especially because there are stunts, fireworks, and guns on every set. People stopped looking at things twice. It became normal to make mistakes. For the goal of being on time, warnings were ignored. A team member who didn't want to be named said that all of the safety rules were not followed. It could have been averted if it had been better managed. The studio, of course, refuted these assertions. They said that the actors and crew were professionals and that working in tough conditions was normal in the business. Some of the execs even said in private that the timetable had been quite hard. People were getting tired from the shoot. The most worrying thing is that the dummy bullets were utilized before. The same ones that put the bullet in the gun. They really created them in the house. The effects crew made that, not a professional manufacturer, and it wasn't checked by a ballistics expert. Like a lot of other stuff on site, it was just thrown together quickly. Brandon Lee might still be alive if someone had simply taken 5 more minutes to check that barrel, if the armorer had been there, and if the crew hadn't been pushed to the point of weariness. These weren't just malfunctions, they were a systematic failing. And following them came a stinging indictment of how safety may be compromised for haste, budget limits, and naive faith in procedures. People say that Hollywood is a place of make-believe. But that night, the trick didn't work. A real bullet took a genuine life. There was still one question that no amount of carelessness could answer. Why did this sound so much like Bruce Lee's death? A scary family connection. When Brandon Lee died, people in Hollywood weren't the only ones who were shocked. It echoed across pop culture, martial arts groups, and most eerily, into the hearts of those who remembered what had happened precisely 20 years ago to another rising star, Bruce Lee, his father. The similarities were too uncanny to miss. Two actors who are related to each other. They both died young. Both happened for unknown reasons. Both are about to become superstars. And both were taken in a way that made people wonder, suspect, and be sad for a long time. There was just as much misunderstanding over Bruce Lee's death in 1973 as there was around Brandon's. The official reason was cerebral edema, which is swelling of the brain. But some of his relatives still think he was killed. Some people thought it was an allergic reaction, some thought it was a secret health problem, and the most common rumor was that the triads were behind it. The triads are a formidable criminal group with strong ties to the Hong Kong film industry. Ed Parker Jr., a martial arts expert whose father coached Bruce, says that the hypothesis wasn't just a rumor. He said that Bruce was vocal, independent, and wouldn't follow the usual power systems in the Eastern film scene. He added that his father thought there was probably foul play involved. Brandon Lee dies from a gunshot on a movie set 20 years later, precisely like Bruce Lee's character in Game of Death, who was shot while acting. Bruce plays an actor in a movie set in 1978. He is filming a scene with a gun. An assassin puts a real bullet into one of the phony guns without him knowing. He genuinely got shot during the scene. The tale is quite similar to what happened to Brandon. Reality copying art, or maybe art copying reality in the creepiest way conceivable. People noticed that. It didn't take long for fans, reporters, and conspiracy theorists to pick it up. A coincidence? A sad copy? Or something far creepier? Brandon had a bright future ahead of him, just like his dad. The only thing that was different was that he didn't do what his father did. He was building on that tradition. People said The Crow would be his big break. After years of small parts and low-budget action movies, this was a big break for him. They had already filmed much of the movie. He was going to marry Eliza Hutton, the woman he had been dating for a long time. Things were going well for him until, like Bruce, he was snatched away before he could see it. Then, some people who were close to the family would have began to talk quietly about the potential that Brandon's death wasn't an accident. The official story didn't make sense. There was no reason to even suppose that a live bullet should have been on that set. And because of the family's history, it didn't seem too far-fetched to think that something bad had happened. Was someone after the Lee family? Were there any old grudges left over from Bruce's time? Or was it just that one man's horrible misfortune cast an unbreakable shadow on his son's life? There is no way to ignore the terrible pattern, whether it is a conspiracy or just a coincidence. At 32, a father dies in a strange way. 20 years later, the son dies at age 28. There is a lot of uncertainty about both. They both enjoy movies, which is what they both love most. Brandon's death, which happened only weeks before his wedding and just weeks before The Crow was supposed to finish filming, made things even worse. There were too many clues for me to ignore: the time, the technique, and the meaning. But if Bruce and Brandon were both victims of something worse, then the cover-up had to be far bigger than anyone thought. The end result. The Crow's production came to a halt when Brandon Lee died. The cast and crew were overwhelmed with grief. For a lot of people, the set didn't feel like a job anymore. It was like a cemetery. The main actor had left. The man who had put everything into this dark lyrical role was now the main character in the tragedy that the movie was based on. And no one was ready for how it would affect them emotionally. Michael Massey was at the center of it all. He was the actor who shot Brandon without knowing it. He quickly withdrew from the public eye. Friends reported he was heartbroken, couldn't be consoled, and couldn't stop thinking about it. Massey didn't say anything about it in interviews years later. But his grief was still fresh when he did. It's something that I'm gonna live with. Everything took me a while to be able to move on with my life, not so much to put everything in perspective. He said, "I don't think you ever get over something like that. It's a part of who I am." He never saw The Crow. The news traveled swiftly through Hollywood. Everyone who had ever worked on a movie set with guns was shaken up, from directors to performers to stunt coordinators. This wasn't just a sad accident. It was a call to action. But as the business mourned, more and more questions came up. Who was to blame? Could this have been stopped? Could someone be charged with a crime? The formal investigation started right away. Detectives looked at the gun, talked to the crew, and put together what happened that night. The .44 Magnum had a blank in it, but the bullet that got trapped in a poorly manufactured dummy round changed that blank into a live round. It was evident what the order was. The result was terrible. But a lot of people thought the story wasn't finished. The media started to dig further. Rumors of foul play came back. Journalists remembered the creepy link to Game of Death, the movie where Bruce Lee's character is struck with a real bullet on set. Brandon was now gone in almost the same way. Brandon's fiancée, Eliza Hutton, had to deal with the unimaginable. She was now making plans for Brandon's memorial, even though she was only weeks away from marrying the love of her life. She was with him in the hospital, holding his hand while the doctors fought to rescue him. After he died, she never spoke to the press. Her silence said more than words could. Thousands of fans came to see him, and many of them went to the Seattle cemetery where Brandon was buried next to his father. United in life and united in legacy, a really moving symbol. It was almost the end for The Crow. The studio spoke about canceling the movie altogether. But after talking to Eliza and Brandon's mother, they decided to finish the movie as a memorial. The production team turned Brandon's unfinished work into a movie by using doubles and early footage mixed with cutting-edge visual effects. When it finally came out in 1994, it didn't only do well. It became a big deal. People who didn't like it said Brandon did a great job. The beautiful sound of it spilling out and the anguish in the poetry were always together. In this movie, he dies and then haunts the people who killed him and the criminals. But Brandon Lee dies while bringing the role to life. Even though it got great reviews and did well at the box office, there were still things that weren't finished. The imprint was at the office of the district attorney. No charges of a crime. There had been too many safety infractions, but they couldn't show that the person meant to break the law. It was called a tragic accident, nothing more. That wasn't quite enough for a lot of individuals. There are still issues regarding the timeframe, unresolved questions concerning the dummy rounds, where safety personnel were during this event, and how the very simple act of inspecting the barrel was missed. But the publicist for The Crow had complained about a dangerous work atmosphere. The team, on the other hand, was agitated, pushed to their limits, and too tired. And just when the world was starting to move on, the autopsy revealed something that made everything seem strange again. Because what they found inside Brandon's corpse didn't match what was supposed to be on the set. They almost buried the truth. 4 months after Brandon Lee died, the public was told one story, that it was a terrible accident caused by poorly handled props, an overworked crew, and a blank round that hit a lodged bullet and killed him. It was a reasonable answer that was neat enough to please the studio, easy enough to prevent lawsuits, and just vague enough to make it hard to tell who was responsible and who was free. But the official papers, especially the autopsy, needed to be looked at more closely. One thing made them raise their eyebrows right away. Lee's body had a .44 caliber bullet taken out of it. The probe is still going on. The bullet that was taken out of Brandon's body was a perfectly undamaged .44 caliber lead slug. Crew members have said several times that there were never meant to be any live rounds on set. Flanks? Yes. Fake rounds? Yes. Real bullets with a full charge and powder? No way. How did a real bullet get into the chamber of a phony gun? At first, investigators thought that the bullet must have come loose from a fake cartridge with a residual primer, as was shown in the prior findings. But forensic professionals who looked at the autopsy discreetly doubted that version. The bullet was in great shape, clean, and showed no signs of having been tampered with or not properly inserted. Some people started to think that this wasn't a modified dummy at all, but a real round made in a factory. That news would change everything. If it was a genuine bullet, that meant someone had to carry live ammo to the set, which is against the rules for film safety. In the early 1990s, it was very rare and quite dangerous to use live ammunition on set. But the official reports never said who made or handled the fake ammunition. Those records are either missing or were never filed. There is still disagreement about who loaded the gun that night. It was even more distressing to hear whispers from whistleblowers who had worked on the Crow and then came forward years later with disturbing charges. A former crew member said that some prop bullets had been manufactured on the fly without anyone watching. He said that the producers had reused and recycled rounds to save time and money, and that they routinely stored real and fake rounds in the same container. Another production member said he observed genuine bullets being brought in during previous scenes that needed realistic-looking munitions on camera, but no one ever confirmed if they had been taken out later. Then someone said that sabotage might not be out of the question. This wasn't just buzz from the tabloids. Detective J.J. Leitner, who led the investigation, says that nothing has been ruled out. Leitner himself admitted years later in an interview that he had a gut sense about the unclear case, but he could never explain it. So who might have a reason? Some conspiracy theorists even brought back the concept that Bruce Lee's death was part of a vengeance, which led them to think that Brandon could be a target for the same reasons by competing studios, jealous insiders, or even the remnants of the Chinese syndicates that Bruce apparently resisted. Some people thought that Brandon's rise to popularity may make some people angry, especially in an industry where money, power, and legacy can make people feel bad. And just like that, there was the real-life twist that Brandon died while acting out his father's made-up death. In the movie Game of Death, Bruce Lee's character dies when a gun that was supposed to be empty unintentionally fires a live ammunition. The way it transpired is virtually exactly like what happened to Brandon in The Crow, right down to the framing, timing, and sad ending. Was it just a coincidence? Or was someone using fiction to send a very real, very deadly message? There were never any official charges brought. There was no new evidence. And after a while, the story became a part of Hollywood legend. But Brandon Lee's impact and the mysteries surrounding his death never went away. In the end, no matter how many reports, hypotheses, and answers are flung around, there is only one question. Who put that bullet in the gun? And why didn't anyone stop them? Brandon Lee's death wasn't simply a tragedy in Hollywood, it was a terrible reminder of a family history full of mystery, bad decisions, and unresolved questions. What do you think took place? Was it a freak accident, or did someone kill Brandon Lee on purpose? Please tell us in the comments. If you want to see more stunning genuine stories from Hollywood, like this one, subscribe, and watch the next video right here.